Okay. Apologize for the tardiness this evening, but we'll call the work session to order. And everybody's getting settled in. We will turn this over momentarily to the city manager for a discussion and review of the proposed capital improvement plan for years FY07 through FY12.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good evening. Tonight, the city staff is here to present to you the proposed CIP for fiscal years 2007 through 2012. This is a 6-year capital improvement plan that we bring before you in accordance with state and local requirements. For your information, back in August, a memo went out to all departments asking them to update this plan and to identify any new projects or equipment that they felt needed to be included in this document. Once all the proposals were submitted, they then were reviewed by a subcommittee of 3 members from the Planning Board, as well as myself and city staff. For FY07, departments submitted requests from the general fund in the amount of $2.8 million. The committee reduced these requests to $1.5 million, a reduction of $1.3 million. In the past, we have tried to maintain a general fund appropriation for capital at between $1 million and $1.5 million. The reason the committee wanted to increase the level to $1.5 million this year was the City Council reduced the proposed appropriations from $1 million to $750,000 in fiscal years 04 and fiscal years 05. As you recall, last year the city put in $1.2 million for capital improvements. Total improvements for fiscal year 07 for all funds is estimated at $22 million, of which 60% will come from either grants or private funds. So that means for every dollar we spend in the capital plan for fiscal year 07, we will receive 60 cents back from some other sources. Okay. Tonight's work session continues the CIP process. On January 19th, just for your information, the Planning Board adopted this capital plan as presented in accordance with their requirements under state statute. After tonight, the City Council will conduct a public hearing on the CIP at your March 20th meeting. After the public hearing, the City Council may adopt the CIP by a simple majority vote. It is anticipated the City Council will vote on the CIP no later than April 3rd, 2006. The CIP, in accordance with the City Charter, needs to be adopted before I submit the proposed FY07 budget to you. So I cannot deliver you the budget until you actually adopt the CIP. The CIP, once adopted, does not bind the City Council to any of the projects listed, but rather only identifies them as part of the actual plan. So the actual appropriations for projects do not occur until after the adoption of the FY07 budget. Further, all projects that require bonding need a separate vote of the City Council, which requires a 2/3 majority to pass. And an example of this is what you're working on right now at the next City Council meeting on Newcastle Avenue. That was an item that was identified back probably in the 2000 capital improvement plan. We started working on getting the 80% funding from the state, and so today in 2006 we were actually bonding that item. So at this time what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the city staff make a presentation of the CIP. The folks at home will be able to see it as the cameras are focused in on the screen. One thing I will mention is that when we get down to the water projects and sewer projects, we will just do a very brief summary because the City Council has already spent 2 full work sessions on each of these areas. So at this time, Dave Holden, will you please proceed?
Okay, the CIP is provided to you in various sections. The first section is vehicles and equipment, and we'll start off with Fire Chief Crystal Clare.
Good evening. This project is the fire rescue boat. As you saw in previous CIPs, we were trying to get this funded through various grant sources. Pleased to inform you that it has been funded 100% through a federal Homeland Security grant. The ambulances are now in the capital improvement plan because of the expense of the vehicles. This is a replacement for ambulance 2 and puts the ambulances back on the replacement schedule. Replacement of fire engine number 4 in fiscal year 08. replacement of fire engine number 7 in fiscal year '09, and the replacement of the aerial ladder in fiscal year 2010. Another vehicle replacement on the heavy rescue unit for 2011.
Good evening. For the police department, we're seeking in fiscal year '08 a mobile command post for emergency operations. This was recommended in the top-off after-action study, can be used every day for major events such as Market Square Day and so forth. And we also will seek grant funding for this.
That was Captain Irving. Maybe for the
I'm
people at
sorry.
home, we just can introduce ourselves. Thank you.
This project is to augment fire department communications through a Homeland Security grant. We have been able to replace all of the mobile radios, and we have portable radios on the way. This is needed infrastructure improvements to support that equipment for fiscal year '08 and '09. This project is the end of a long-term project to replace all of the municipal fire alarm system and the included wire, fiscal year '07 and fiscal year '08, and that should end the program. Another continuing process of turnout gear replacement, final year, fiscal year '07. The firefighter turnout gear cleaning system, we were able to purchase a complete set for fiscal year '06 for Station 1. This has been pushed off till fiscal year '09. The thought process being that if we do build new stations, it'll be included in that process. This project for fiscal year '07 and fiscal year '08 updates the LifePak 12s and all of our vital monitoring devices for the ambulances. This is the second part of a 2-year process to replace aging self-contained breathing apparatus cylinders for fiscal year '07.
For the police department, beginning in fiscal year '07, monies to encrypt the portable radios. We have approximately 125 radios, and we're looking to add encryption equipment to the radios for secure communications. A reverse 911 system for fiscal year '08. This could be used to notify residents from the police department or the other city departments in the event of criminal activity, evacuation information in disaster situations. We would seek grants for it, and this should work in conjunction with similar state of New Hampshire systems that 911 in Concord might be looking at as well.
This is a process for fiscal year '07 and fiscal year '08 to add a total of 7 automated external defibrillators for public use in the city buildings. This project is the engineering and architectural funds for the replacement of the fire department's 2 substations. Station 3 replacement is identified in the capital plan for fiscal year 2008, and the next slide is Station 2. Fiscal year 2009. The station committee is doing a tremendous amount of work. This does not mean that those stations will be built in that year. It's there for identification purposes only, and that is subject to not only the year changing, but also the amount of money changing.
For fiscal year '07, monies to complete the upgrade to the firing range in the police department. This project was started in fiscal year '06, and it includes the replacement of the bullet trap and the repair of the sidewalls in the firing range. In fiscal year '09, monies to expand the police garage, install a lift. We have numerous situations where we have vehicles that we need to store and other equipment. So we're seeking monies in '09 to expand the garage. And monies in fiscal year '08 to expand the evidence room. Again, we have large quantities of evidence that we're currently holding. Advancing technologies makes examination of older evidence possible, and there are many times legal requirements that require us to hold on to evidence, so we seek the expansion of the evidence room in '08.
Bob Lister, Superintendent of Schools. The school department facilities for capital improvements include funding for the 7 buildings, the school buildings, and for money in this case to replace roofs, sprinkler systems, windows, boilers, and bleachers at the high school. Portsmouth Middle School, there is a Portsmouth Middle School Needs Assessment Study Committee, which has been meeting for the past year and a half, and we are looking at replacing or renovating the present middle school building. We have a needs assessment study that shows at this point It would be more cost efficient and effective with the programming to replace the building than renovate. However, we are looking at a cost of renovation as well. And it's because of the classroom layout and the educational space and engineering review that has to be completed. And School Department Building Renovation Phase 3, which includes, again, roofs and windows and buildings that will need some attention within the next 5 to 7 years. And these are the 3 elementary schools.
Mary Ann List, Library Director. Unprecedented increases in construction costs this year, due largely to storms in the Gulf region, have presented us with some real challenges as we've proceeded to build a new library. We have, however, through value engineering, been able to keep that construction project in line with its budget. But we do find that we will need capital money for some of the furnishings and equipment. We've identified approximately $350,000 in furnishings and equipment that we'll need capital funds for. That includes approximately 1/3, maybe more at this point, of our steel shelving, some of our tables and chairs, most of our comfortable seating, and some of the meeting room chairs and tables.
Cindy Hayden, Deputy City Manager and Community Development Director. The McIntyre project, this first phase sets aside $25,000 to begin the conceptual planning process for redevelopment, and that's expected to be a very public process with lots of input. Next project, this sets aside $25,000 in the coming fiscal year from the general fund to continue open space and land acquisition, open space protection, similar to what we did with the Sagamore Headlands to purchase that property. As many of you know, I've been in Portsmouth a long time. Back in the 70s, there used to be 3 or 4 dozen historic markers in town, and this project sets aside $10,000 in the coming fiscal year to start to put those signs back. As I'm sure you all know, we've done almost all the parks and playgrounds in town, major redevelopment, just about to do Maple Haven this spring. This Plains Ball Field area is really the last one to be done, and this sets aside funds in FY08, and that would be done in conjunction with major road improvements in that area. Master plan, I'm sure you all know, we just completed that. This is really the meat of the master plan, which is the regulatory revisions to our land use regs, and this is an additional $100,000 to combine with the existing $100,000 we have in this current fiscal year to hire consulting services to carry out that work. This is a piece of land owned by the Greek Church between the high school and Ledgewood Manor, which is now known as Winchester Place, and this is really a public-private partnership awaiting matching funds from the partner in this project to bring this forward to fruition. As you know, we acquired Sagamore Headlands a couple of years ago, and we have some money set aside and some grant funds to build a canoe and kayak dock, and this is the additional funds needed to build the kayak dock. Schaghticoke Riverwalk, we have $1.5 million in federal funding, so that's really just marking that here, the construction funds from outside sources other than the general funds. Pierce Island Master Plan, we don't show any money. In this coming fiscal year, we've carried out hundreds of thousands of dollars of recreational improvements out there over the last 5 to 8 years, and we will be installing the new boat dock and ramp there this spring. But that's already funded in this current fiscal year. North Mill Pond pedestrian and bikeway project. This is one that's been on the books for a while. Really can't be carried out until the private entity that owns most of that land, which is the railroad, is willing to participate because they own the land. But eventually we'd like to see a bikeway and pedestrian way there. And this is a continuation of the McIntyre project in out federal years. Once we get the conceptual planning started, this would be to get into the more detailed preliminary engineering design for that redevelopment project.
Steve Parkinson, Public Works Director. The first project we have is the reclamation of the former stump dump for recreational purposes, capping of the old stump dump, and creating multi-purpose playing fields. Next project is the continuing improvements to the historic cemeteries. We have made 4 major historic cemeteries that we have been working with the cemetery committee to rehab and resurrect some of the stones that have been damaged over the years. Municipal complex site improvements, similar in nature to the improvements that took place around the old cottage hospital, sidewalks, curbing, paving, landscaping, and lighting. Very important component to the HVAC system for this facility is the cooling tower, which sits on top of the building. It is deteriorated rapidly in its environment and its type of use, and this is to replace it in its entirety, quite probably locating it in a vault of some sort on the ground level to diminish the noise which is traveling across the pond into the residential neighborhoods. Aerial photography is an important component to our GIS system. It was last flown in '94, and it's time for us to fly the city again and update our mapping. Stormwater master plan, as with any federal government rules and regulations, the city is being inundated with new requirements dealing with our stormwater. This is a project similar to what we've done to our water and sewer system and come up with a master plan of where we need to go in the future. High Hanover Parking Facility, these are capital improvements that come out of our Parking and Transportation Fund to restore the structural integrity of mostly the earlier part of the 1985 portion of the parking garage with joint replacements, repainting of the structural steel. Every other year we request funds for citywide facilities improvements. These are improvements that are done to all of the municipal buildings owned and under the control of the city, such as roof repairs, window replacements, boilers, and projects like the chimney replacement we did a few years back. The next project out in FY08 is the replacement of the roof for the indoor pool. This project is well in excess of its life expectancy, and we've had a number of blowouts with the fiberglass type panels on the roof. They are deteriorating because of the atmosphere, both inside and outside of the facility, and we're exploring options to replace that roof in its entirety.
This project, mobile data terminal systems, would put mobile data terminals in the frontline apparatus as well as a server and a wireless connection at the station for real-time data as far as pre-planning, which can then be used to aid the first 2 companies in response.
Alan Brady, Communications Supervisor. This project is for the television studio, general upgrades including portable equipment. Ongoing replacement of citywide servers, 2 scheduled for this year. And ongoing citywide workstation replacement, 40 scheduled for this year.
Steve Parkinson again. The first transportation project we have is a project that is not city funded, but is identified as a county-wide project dealing with the study of passenger service on the Hampton and Rockingham branches of the railroad. Next project is, there again, another project that is not funded by the city, but is identified here. It is the Coast Route 2, which is Portsmouth to Dover, Somersworth and Rochester, and the frequency that program has increased to handle the ridership that they are experiencing. As part of the Spalding Turnpike upgrade, the state there again is proposing a commuter express bus service from the Rochester, Somersworth, Dover area down into the Pease, Portsmouth area. When the city expanded its trolley service down Lafayette Road in conjunction with Coast, the thought was always to expand that service down to Ryan, Hampton. There again, this is federal and state funding and other sources of funding rather than city. As we've increased our transit system throughout the city, one of the things that we are lacking is infrastructure for bus shelters. And this project is to utilize federal transportation funds as well as some funds from the city to systematically install bus shelters throughout our routes. The next project is the Public Transportation Greater Portsmouth Transportation Management Association in setting up ride-sharing types of programs for the many businesses and clientele of the Pease development area. Identified in '08 is a parking facility to be built on the Worth Municipal Parking Lot. The free parking shared lot agreements, currently we have an agreement with the Masonic Temple and other parties to supply public parking at various times, and this helps to fund improvements to those parking lots. Wright Avenue parking lot improvements in conjunction with the replacement of the Scott Ave Bridge and the rehabilitation of the Memorial Bridge. We're proposing to rehab the Wright Avenue parking lot to control access and improve the visibility and aesthetics of that particular area. Under our bike ped pedestrian type projects, we have Market Street Extension bike ped improvements, putting in a sidewalk and bicycle improvements between the State Pier and the current sidewalk at Michael Susi Drive. Back in '04, when we rehabbed the parking lot in the back of this facility, it was discovered there was a dire need for pedestrian traffic between basically Mount Vernon Street and the front of this facility. These funds in '07 would be utilized to put in a defined sidewalk area between the back of the building to the front of this facility. In '08, we're looking at a project to replace and expand the sidewalks on Market Street between the Square and Bow Street. Currently, we have sidewalks that are not wide enough for the amount of pedestrian traffic that is on that stretch of road. If you all remember back not too many years ago, that was a two-way street at one time. There was plenty of width for us to widen the sidewalks and still retain the parking on both sides of the street. Every 2 years, in conjunction with our pavement management, we request funds for citywide sidewalk reconstruction, and that is why we're asking for $500,000 to work on sidewalk replacements within the areas that we're doing pavement management on the streets. A project both federally funded and PDA funded is a bike pedestrian Grafton Road bikeway from Route 33 into Corporate Drive. In '09, we've identified new shoulders and sidewalk on Peverly Hill, basically from the YMCA to the intersection of Peverly Hill and Route 33. And also in '08, we're identifying a sidewalk from Islington Street to Middle Road on Spinney Road. A project that's in quite an out year, FY11, is sidewalk construction along Route 1. Typically, the state will not fund sidewalks on their roadway systems, and as in the past, the city has funded sidewalks in other areas along state routes, and this one is in '11. A project that was identified last year and included this year for funding is the Islington Street Spinney Road intersection. Because of its odd angle, there are a number of site problems. This project would bring Spinney Road into a T intersection with Islington, reducing the speed of some of the vehicles entering Islington Street and increase the safety of the sight distance. We've been systematically replacing our old signal equipment throughout the city. We have 2 intersections under design right now, both on the ends of Miller Ave where it meets Middle and Sagamore. Both of these projects will be getting underway, and these funds are utilized in replacing that aging equipment. In conjunction with the Route 33 B&M Bridge project that stretches from Griffin Road to Peverly Hill, we're looking at the problems that we encounter with the Plains Road that cuts across by the ball field at the Peverly Road intersection, and we're including that as part of the work within that Route 33 corridor. In '08, there's a project to upgrade the signal crossings on Market Street. The railroad has already replaced the rail bed itself, and now we're looking at replacing the actual safety mechanisms, the arms and the crossbars, in conjunction with a state-funded project. On Woodbury Ave at Durgan Lane, we have a situation whereby we have backups from that intersection back towards Gosling Road. We have found that the majority of that issue is because there is no right turn at that intersection onto Durgan Lane. And this project in '08 would fund at the addition of a right turn lane to get that traffic out of the main queue and onto that Durgan Lane. Identified in '08 is the Islington Bartlett Jewel Court realignment. I think we're all familiar with that particular intersection and its problems that we have there. This is to replace that intersection. A project that is currently identified in FY11 for design and FY12 for construction is the Constitution Route 1 intersection. The city has received a contribution from a developer in that area that we are anticipating will speed up the process and get that project moving much earlier than FY11. We're identifying the ultimate replacement of the Sagamore Creek Bridge on Sagamore Ave. That particular bridge has just been inspected, and we're going to be doing some interim improvements to make the bridge last until its ultimate replacement in FY10. We're identifying funding for the Pierce Island Bridge rail replacement. The current railing is in deteriorating condition, and it meets no standards at all, and we'll be replacing it with approved modern materials. As I said earlier, New Hampshire Route 33 B&M Railroad Bridge replacement is a project that is in preliminary design at the current time. It is a project that is going to look at not only the replacement of that bridge, which is owned by the state of New Hampshire, but also the roadway on each side of that bridge back to Griffin Road and to Beverly Hill Road. The Scott Avenue Bridge is owned by the City of Portsmouth, and as part of the Memorial Bridge rehabilitation, this bridge will be replaced in its entirety in FY09 at the present time. And the Memorial Bridge rehabilitation itself is scheduled for FY09. A project that has been identified in out years is the replacement of the B&M Railroad Bridge over Bartlett Street. Because of the height limitations on that, it does preclude certain amounts of traffic getting into the city of Portsmouth, and we're looking at a joint venture in FY11. The Kate Street Bridge replacement. This is a small bridge on Kate Street, which we're slating for replacement in FY11 with design monies in 9 and 10.
Cindy Hayden, Deputy City Manager. This project is pedestrian safety and aesthetic improvements on the publicly owned portion of Ceres Street, and that would be carried out in FY08 with the Riverwalk improvements. And this is a continuation of streetscape improvement in Atlantic Heights, and this is completely funded with Community Development Block Grant.
Chestnut Street improvements. There has been a proposal from the African American Burial Committee to dead-end Chestnut Street. That proposal has gone before the council previously. These are funds for FY07 to implement the recommendations that came out of that committee. Gateway improvements, Exit 7. This project identified with some design money in '07 and construction money in '08 and '09 would be in conjunction with other projects that we have in this corridor to improve the aesthetics of the gateway into the city, as well as lighting and safety improvements along this corridor. FY07, we're looking at the Congress Street area improvements, basically going from where the original Market Square project left off and continuing those improvements along Congress Street up to its intersection with Maplewood and Middle Street. Number of projects that you'll be seeing now. This particular one is Route 1 bypass north from the circle. The Route 1 bypass advisory task force has been looking at improvements to this corridor for the last 2 years, basically spearheaded by the replacement need of the existing bridges. We're looking at all kinds of options to improve the stretch of road. This particular project is from the circle north and primarily with construction in FY10. Next project is Yoshun Road upgrade traffic calming. For the city to take ownership, a deal was made with New Hampshire DOT to supply a certain amount of funding from '07 through FY11 to make improvements to this corridor, with the city ultimately obtaining ownership of Ocean Road to the town line. In conjunction with a number of other studies that are ongoing in the city, one is the truck routing study to find out where our trucks are going and where they're coming from, so that we can have a better handle on where the control should be in the city, and we're slating that funding for FY08. Another federal project, unfortunately being funded by the city, is in conjunction with signage. There are new requirements to street signs, speed limit signs, any kind of sign that we put up out there, and this funding would be to inventory all the various signs we have throughout the system and get them into our GIS system. Each year we spend an enormous amount of time dealing with trees in the city, and this is to fund a replacement of trees that have succumbed to the urban atmosphere that we have. We're looking at $20,000 a year to replace our street trees over the next from 07 through FY12. The next project is our street paving management and rehabilitation. These are the funds that we utilize to rehab our streets, along with water and sewer projects to get the most bang for our buck. A Route 1 project that the state is proposing in FY08 is roadway reconstruction between Wilson Road and Constitution Ave, making the cross-section the same as you come through, rather than going from 2 lanes to 1 lane, back to 2 lanes to 1 lane. They're going to make it a constant cross-section through this stretch of road. Another Route 1 bypass project is from the Circle South, the same type of thing as I mentioned about the north leg. We're looking at construction in FY12. And the biggest component of that Route 1 bypass is the replacement of the existing traffic circle, and they're looking at a number of options for that and slated funding for FY10. Islington streetscape improvements, in conjunction with the Economic Development Commission, we're looking at improvements to this corridor for safety as well as aesthetics and lighting. Project that was identified last year was Woodbury Ave traffic calming improvements, basically from its intersection with the bypass all the way out to where it intersects with Market Street Extension. This project has been submitted for funding. At the present time, it is not identified in the 10-year plan, other than footnoted as if there was other funds available, that this project should be seriously looked at by the state. The project in conjunction with the PDA is the intersection of Corporate, International, and Durham, putting in a roundabout to eliminate that current situation there. And, the next series of projects deal with streets on the airbase. In FY08, rehabilitation of New Hampshire Ave. In FY09, some work on Rochester Ave. In FY08, work on Corporate Drive, a portion of Corporate Drive between Rye and Goose Bay. And a project on International Drive in FY10.
Dave Allen, Deputy Director of Public Works. On January 12th, we gave you a comprehensive overview of the sewer system and some of the issues we're dealing with there. In summary, our capital plan is focusing on the sewer separation projects to reduce the combined sewer overflows and also reduce flow over to our wastewater treatment plants. In addition to funding that, the separation projects will be doing studies to look at options related to our wastewater treatment plants. And the funding for the wastewater side typically comes through the state revolving fund loans, state aid grants, state and tribal aid grants, and user fees. Likewise, on January 23rd, we provided an overview of the water system, and the focus of our capital plans is going to be increasing availability of source water, annual water line upgrades, and ultimately the design and new treatment plant to replace the existing Madbury water treatment plant.
Your Honor, that completes the presentation. There was a lot of material that we went through, but many of you that have served either on the planning board or with the city council prior know many of the projects that have been identified. We have the various staff people available. At this time, Your Honor, I would ask if there are any questions and open it up for those inquiries from the city council.
Councilor Whitehouse.
First of all, I'd like to bring a little humor to the group. I'd like to refer to page 46 and 47. It shows some tube and knobbing electrical and some worn hose that is on the stern of a truck. And I've seen these two pictures for probably at least 15 years, and after you finish with them, I think we ought to donate them to the Portsmouth Athenaeum.
Well, Counselor, what we'll do is we will frame them for you.
All right,
Okay?
I wish you would.
And David will take care of that, but Council makes a good point.
Very good. Any other questions along those same lines?
Maybe.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councilor Dwyer.
Page 63, just a question about the, I think Bob Lister alluded to the ongoing study or additional study to look at replacement, the cost of renovation, as well as building a new middle school. And I wonder where the cost figures for the study portions, were those from prior years, or are they reflected somewhere?
Yes, those are from prior years. We've completed the study. We have a study that's available through the Needs Assessment Committee for building a new building. The committee's meeting and to discuss that, and that's what we're presenting in this budget. Right,
but what about, you alluded to a study for the cost of what renovating the current building would be to be able to judge whether the building the new would be a better option, and where are those costs reflected?
That has not been done yet. That has not been completed.
Right, but would that be part of capital improvement plan, the cost for that study?
At this point, it is not part of the capital improvement plan.
That might be something that could be placed in. That is a very good comment. If there is a number that can be associated with that, it probably should, like the fire stations or other projects, probably something we might want to include in are for 07 or 08, whatever that time frame is. Maybe, Doctor, if it's possible, we can talk to your consultants, see what they think that number might be, because then we could put it in. If it's 07, we'd want it to be more more precise. If it's for identification purpose for 08, it can be a little squishy, I guess.
We'd be interested, if we're going to do that, to make that as part of 2007.
Well, if you could provide us with that information as soon as possible, that'd be helpful.
Glad to get that for you.
And just for clarification, so the whole council understands the timeline for that, because if I understood what you said at the outset, the approval of the for FY07 certainly, and if we're talking about that year, the time is of the essence. That'd have to be before the presentation of the full budget, correct?
Well, what would be useful for us is tomorrow, but that's not necessarily doable. But what we need to do now is we will be putting together this document in final form after the council makes its suggestion for changes this evening, so that we would have it available and advertised for your public hearing on March 20th. Just a piece of information for new council members. This is why we're doing the work session probably 6 weeks earlier than we typically have done in the past. Councilors have asked for it earlier so there could be substantive changes if need be. So what we need, I guess, is a cost of study for middle school project, and we will identify it within this plan with an element sheet. If that's okay with the city council, Your Honor, I think maybe, is that a consensus?
Yeah. That would seem.
In fact, I want to speak on it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to continue on this topic before kind of clear that. So I think I saw Assistant Mayor Farini.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up and voice my agreement with Councilor Dwyer in her offering. I make a respectful and gentle suggestion as well. You know, if you do want to build a middle school, if we want to and have the will to do so as a community, we might consider, I'm not saying this evening, but we might consider actually convening a joint budget committee, specifically so that that study might be done in combination with that, so that there's input from, you know, as you know, in a joint budget committee for a school, you have council members.
Joint building.
Joint building, rather. Sorry, I don't want to tick anyone off on the joint budget committee. But a joint building committee, not a joint budget committee, because you have school board members and council members, and you could ask for a study. And here's my point. Having reviewed the findings, and I had seen them before in the executive summary of the program and faculty facility analysis, while I might be persuaded that curriculum dictates the building of a new facility, and I will confess I probably am persuaded that way, I don't know that there's a unanimity of opinion in the community in that regard. And so the only way, the fastest way to move the ball down the field on that one, in my opinion, is to do a comprehensive study of the rebuild and reconstruction of the current facility so that we can do the due diligence that we have to do as a public body. And so, you know, I would go one better and say, if you want to think about a joint building committee, that's something I'd certainly support.
And Councilor Whitehouse,
Yeah,
question about this as
following up
well.
on that same subject, I read with tremendous interest of this Portsmouth Middle School Needs Assessment Study Committee, and there was nothing mentioned in reference to renovating the present, I still call it the junior high, but it's the middle school, and the public out there is quite concerned. Why isn't this being at least looked at and come up with some figures? And so I support what Councilor Dwyer and Councilor Farini is suggesting, and I think it should be done immediately.
Any other comments about this? Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As many people probably know, I'm the new mayor has appointed me to be the new council representative to the Portsmouth Middle School Needs Assessment Committee. Hopefully people also know that I am I'm going to support Councilor Freeney and Councilor Whitehouse, and even go a little farther. I'm on record by a letter that I wrote back in September 2004, raising, if I recall it correctly, 10 different points, questions. Suffice it to say, I'm just not on board with the decision that. Which in my view is an enormous decision, which has ramifications far beyond just the school department. I'm not on board with the decision that has been made by the middle school assessment committee that the current middle school is inadequate and we need to build a new building. So I am going to be recirculating my letter that I wrote in September 2004. With some additional comments, and I would certainly support what Councilor Farini, what the Assistant Mayor suggested, and perhaps a lot more. But I'm very concerned about continuing to spend money. The most recent item in the paper mentioned that the school board was planning to spend money to investigate the possibility of building an access road to this site off of Route 1, and I'm just shaking my head here going, whoa, this is a huge decision, which in my view has not been adequately vetted through other than a small group of folks at the school board level and with one council representative during the last term. So that's what I want to say for now.
Any other comments about this issue? Obviously, there are many others. We'll get to them, but want to try to clean them up one at a time. One comment I would make, just that I think it's pretty obvious listening to several thoughtful comments, is that I think it's pretty clear that regardless of where one, and I don't mean just a counselor, but the community, it's probably a pretty good reflection of the community in a lot of ways. Some folks are very excited to begin tomorrow. Some folks are skeptical in the opposite direction. Probably a lot of people have not yet really contemplated it a whole lot. But it seems that regardless of where they're coming from, there may be a tremendous amount of value to a study of other options of various kinds, either to confirm or dispel, but I think would build a lot of public confidence, if nothing else. And that's a key part, so that you've got real public buy-in in a broad way for whatever the final result is. So that seemed to be one thing tonight, people coming from different places, but ending up, it seems, at the same place. And that may be good in the long term for community support and doing the best job for, I think, what we're all trying to do. Councilor Grasso.
Yes. I would like to see us push out the capital amounts for the '08 and '09 funding for the A middle school, whether it's renovated or new. And I'll tell you the reason why is politically, I don't feel the city is ready to fund another new school building right now. Another point is that we don't have a site. There's no site that's been definitely chosen to be the site of a new school. The needs assessment, that the report that I had, it looked like the middle school just looked at one particular type of teaching and decided that's what they want for a middle school. And someone who's been here long enough to reflect that when we went through all that type of specific teaching mode when they built Little Harbor, because that was the thing, and by the time they got Little Harbor built, it was no longer the way to educate, and they've been trying to, renovate and rectify that ever since. So I'm not saying I wouldn't vote in favor of bonding for a new school, but I do think that to have it as '08 is a little bit soon, because that's the next budget year after this one that we're talking about. So my feeling would be to push it down at least a couple of years, maybe for '10 and '11, because it will take a time to get a site determined and to go through and get the plans and built and everything like that. So that's my feeling on it.
And to be clear for those at home, if I understand correctly, the outside of FY07, in practical matter, they're really identification beyond that, though they make a strong statement, as you're saying, as to the immediacy. So just for folks at home that may think, what's going to happen in a few months? Are we deciding things all the way out to 12? Beyond FY07, it's identification, essentially. And Dr. Lister, I know you wanted to make a comment, so I'll give you that opportunity.
If I may, I just wanted to thank you for your comments, but I also wanted to just let everyone know at home who may be watching this that we have the study available for anyone who wanted to look at that. We know we need to do some work with this, but however, we do feel it's an important project, and we'd be glad to talk to anyone out there that is interested in asking the kinds of questions that you're asking and looking for more information. And I hope people will call me before they just read in the paper that the school board wants to do something. I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to agree with what Councilor Grasso was saying. I already had the arrow over here too to slide it out a few years, and I do realize, being very familiar with the capital improvement plan, that the out years are the out years. But I don't want anyone to look at this document and think that we are making that type of statement, because I would also like to see if there's some way we can get some monies in there for the study to be done, to begin maybe into the '07 year.
Just a point of procedure. Instead of voting on all these things tonight, what typically you would do is you would have your public hearing and people would speak to the issue as it's presented here. And then on April, I believe it would be April 3rd or thereabouts, whenever you're approving this, you would make amendments to the capital improvement plan at that time. And that way we can identify. So for example, I think we did this last year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe, but you would then, Councilor Grasso, at that time said, I'd like to move to push out to 2010 the capital improvements for the middle school, and that would be a separate vote on that night. And if you have a list of them, fine, you can go through those. But what I would ask, just so that we can have for planning purposes for the capital plan, the only thing, if we're going to add something that's going to affect the general fund for this year, the only thing I would ask is I'll put that in for the public hearing, so the public has an opportunity to speak to that issue. But when it's an out year like this, Councilor and Your Honor, my suggestion is that we leave it intact until we get to the actual voting of the capital plan in April. You make your list, doesn't matter what they are, you bring them forward, you get a second to them, you discuss them, and you move them out or you keep them in the same place. But in the particular instance on the study, I need to get probably those numbers as soon as possible, so that's going to affect your general fund number.
And I assume, not to presume, but there seemed to be a consensus on pursuing that study concept for FY07 for the purpose of putting it into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Assistant Mayor.
I just, so that someone hears a contrary voice, I heartily endorse the study, because if we don't decide with all the facts, we don't want another library dispute in our community. But I will respectfully differ with my fellow councilors Grasso and Smith in that I think that building, despite the best efforts of staff and all concerned, should not be used by our children in its current state any longer than is necessary. So I'm not so sure I'm inclined to push it out, but it means, of course, that a whole lot of work has to get done to get it done politically and move it forward, and that's a hard thing to do, so I just offer that comment.
Councilor Dwyer.
To follow up Dr. Lister's point, I read in the minutes of the middle school study that a formal population projection study had been done, and if you would also make that available at the same time, and if we could have that as well, I think that would help in our thinking about scale and the developmental nature of the school.
Very good. Any other questions or comments about this issue? Kind of figured this might take a minute. Yes, Councilor Grasso.
Your Honor, it's about this issue, but about other issues too. It says down here, impact on operating budget, and it says no impact anticipated. And I find that sort of, I just don't understand why that was put there, because certainly if you're going to build a new school and it's going to be bigger and so forth, the operating budget certainly is going to be impacted. So I don't know if that was just a routine statement that they put in or what.
Your Honor,
take it
if I might,
literally.
I understand that is an area, as you know, we try to improve on the CIP every year. Over the years, you've seen the improvements with the additions. We have not gotten to define those numbers as best we can. So you'll find that in all element sheets that they're not defined.
Very good. Councilor Reynolds.
Once again, I would actually find myself wanting to second Councilor Farini, the Assistant Mayor's comments, in that, notwithstanding my earlier comments about the decision about the middle school, that is not to say that I think that our current middle school is a fine facility and can continue to be the Portsmouth Middle School for the next however many years. I would agree that we shouldn't necessarily push this capital funding out, several years, but rather do what's necessary quickly to make sure that our middle school kids have a first-class facility. And just to point out, I have 3 children, and they'll all be going through middle school here in Portsmouth, so it's a very important issue to me. It's not about being against spending the money, but it's rather the decision of where. Thanks.
Very good. Okay. With that, Councilor, is this the same or?
Another subject.
I think we're ready to
All right.
roll on to something else.
Let's turn, and the reason why I mention this, because I'm on the committee to study the 2 fire stations, Station 2 and 3. Let's turn to page 56 and 57. Now, at our last committee meeting, we directed our city manager to go out for an RFP in reference to Station 2. Now, in this report, you're talking about a $2,500,000 figure in FY08 to replace Station 3. Now, there's been no determination. It's strictly Station 2 we've talked about.
Can I speak to that issue?
Yep.
Thank you, Council. As we talked about earlier this evening, and you have to realize that when we started putting this plan together, we started doing it back in August, and that meeting just happened a couple weeks ago. So yes, during the what we'll do is during the deliberations in April, we will probably switch those around when we get more information relative to that. Again, these projects are identified, and in the last, like I said, 2 or 3 weeks, that's the information that we have. So certainly you are correct. They should be flipped. So Station 2 should really be identified in that regard. And Station 3, actually, probably, if I were to suggest something, physically, we'd want to do that in 2010, not 2009. So.
This would be an amendment at a.
Right, and you certainly could make that amendment, Counselor.
all right.
And my suggestion to that is that you amend that, and also that on Station, so that Station 2 would be identified in 2008. And Station 3, my suggestion would be, for Station 3, is that be put into 2010. Because physically, to build those stations, you're not going to be able to do them back-to-back in those years. It just would be very difficult. So my suggestion would be to do 2008 for Station 2 and 2010 for Station 3.
A quick question, actually, for Councilor Whitehouse. Is it, and you may, I apologize if you've said this, was it the consensus of the group that 2 needed it more immediately than
Yes.
3? And okay.
Yes, that's right. And there's been no determination to demolish Station 3 yet.
And again, these are identified. This started back in August, that meeting, and that decision took place 3 weeks ago.
Very good. Any other questions along? Yes.
I'd just like to ask Chief Leclerc, if not doing it, if you do it in back-to-back years, does that create operational difficulties given the vagaries of construction or not?
Why don't you grab the portable?
Again, I would like to reiterate that the city manager is correct. We were on board with that. It is a matter of construction costs, whether the city can handle doing, and we talked about this in committee, whether the city can handle doing both stations in 1 year, but that creates operational issues for us. I think we've identified as the subcommittee, station committee, that Station 2 needs to happen. It needs to happen soon, and giving a 2-year or 1 year break in the capital gives other projects a chance to be heard as well, and it still gets our objective met. Does that answer your questions?
It does, Chief. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions on this topic? Well, we try to keep it at seeing none. We'll go on. Councilor Dwyer.
Next, page 70. And here I'm speaking as a representative to the planning board. I think the interest of certainly the planning board, but also a number of members of this council, is to make sure that we begin implementing the recommendations related to zoning and land use in the master plan as soon as possible. And when Cindy was describing this, she indicated that there was prior year's funding of $100,000 in addition to what is here for FY07, but I don't see that in the prior year's funding. And I know that I know there's a lot of concern about moving as quickly as possible on this particular piece. So I just wanted you to respond to that.
There is actually $100,000 in this current fiscal year, which I thought was in there at one point, but that's editorial. We should.
So it is actually.
That's an error. That's an
Okay.
error. So we need to
Right.
make sure we put that in for the corrected document.
Very good. Any other follow-up, Councilor, along those lines? If not, I'll go with Assistant Mayor Ferrini.
Just following up on Councilor Dwyer's comment with respect to the funding of the rewrite, one thing that I guess has been charged back to the planning department as a result of our last meeting was, if the question is, what's it going to take to get 50% of this done in 6 months? If there is an additional allocation to pending, then we would need that recommendation. It's my understanding that we were to hear something back at the February 13th meeting, and I think timing-wise, I guess that works okay. But if there is an additional calculation, 2 people writing instead of 1, or 3 people writing instead of 2, and what does that cost, that's something that would certainly be helpful to us in making our decision.
If I might, Your Honor, just to respond to the Assistant Mayor, we do have the $100,000 in fiscal 06 budget. When I get back to you on the 13th with the milestones that we will put in, you'll find that we will certainly have enough money to do what we need to do in 06, and then it'll fold as this money, if appropriated by the City Council, is available as of July 1, 2006. So hypothetically, if we get on track in the springtime in the 3-month block, let's say what we're looking at trying to do is break it down into the milestones in the blocks of 3 months. And we're still working on that schedule, but that's what we're going to try to do. So when we put out the RFP, we get it in, we get the planning board together, we talk about how they want to proceed. I think we want to break it up into, I think we talked about almost 6 phases of the project. 4 dealing with the rewrite of regulations, then we have subdivision in the 5th, and then the 6th, I forgot what the other one was.
Site review and design review.
So we want the 3-month blocks. And the ones most pressing, A priorities, B priorities, C priorities, et cetera. That's how we're going to proceed. But that will be something we'll provide you in a report back on the 13th.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, we'll take any questions on any of the topics here. Councilor Grasso.
Page 100, please. In light of the agreement that we came to on with the Worth agreement, I was wondering if we still wanted to leave that item in there for 08.
Again,
It's an awful, even for planning purposes, that's a large sum to.
right.
leave
And
it there.
and again, if you recall, if I might, Your Honor, I think Councilor Grasso, you originally made the motion to move it out to 08, and it was originally, this has been in the capital plan for probably 6 or 7 years. So when it did come up for planning, we've done preliminary studies already. We have the studies in place. We have them. There was, in fact, a work session back probably in January of 2004 when we talked about the Worth lot, and we had all the plans and everything for the preliminary review. And at that time, there was a discussion to move it out to 08, and that's where we've left it, because that was the last action by the city council. And because it was a city council action, I chose not to move it to any other year.
I was just thinking in light of the fact that eventually, I think we will get the parking garage in connection with the Sheridan expansion.
Sure.
And there might be a parking facility attached to the McIntyre
Sure.
project. So I don't know if I don't think we should take it out because you never know, but I think maybe we could comfortably move that out a few years when.
Well, again, Your Honor, if I might, the Councilor Grasso can make that motion on April 3rd, and certainly, if it passes, we'll move it to the year that you've identified.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions along those lines? Okay, no, Councilor Smith.
Thank you. On page 89, the television studio, I know that we're currently looking at a new contract with the cable. Is there any way of tying this into that contract, or is there any funds that come out of that could be used to pay for this as opposed to coming out of general funds?
I'll respond to that, Your Honor, after I write my little note to myself on the Worth parking lot.
This is where the dining music would be appropriate.
Yes. Okay. Relative to that question, Counselor, yes, the Cable Commission is in the process of their hearings, and we'll be going into negotiations with Comcast. There is money that we do receive, and it's about $280,000 a year we receive in franchise fees. It's 5% of the gross for the cable, not for internet or telephone. Those are general fund revenues, so if you were going to be utilizing those, you hypothetically could say, we're going to use this money now for the studio, but in reality, what happens is that's a revenue source that you've lost. So,
just to follow up, is there any way in those negotiations that we could have them pick up any of the costs of these type of things?
we went through that in the last negotiations without getting too far into discussion relative to that. You'll find that Comcast has taken a hard line in that position. They're pretty much a monopoly, and they have taken a hard line on that. One of the things they'd be more than happy to do is pass that cost through to the customers. So, yes, but in the last city council directive to me was, let's limit what we pass through to the customer. And so that's where we're at with them. But there's good news. Verizon is looking to start competing, so you never know.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on any item? Councilor Whitehouse.
City Manager, may I ask one question?
Absolutely.
John, do we strive in past capital improvement plans, do we strive to stay within the figures that's been given to us going back 06, 05? You know, do we, as we put in as we approve of a 5-year plan, and there's figured in various years, 06, 07, 08, 09, do we strive to keep those figures intact, especially in the general fund?
The general fund, absolutely. Once the monies have been appropriated, so for example, the FY06, when we appropriated $1,170,000 in the general fund, those dollars are assigned to a specific project. So those dollars cannot be spent unless it's for that specific project. If, for example, a project costs, if we budget $100,000 for a project and it costs $95,000, that additional $5,000 would go into a contingency fund, which we would utilize if, for example, a project was budgeted $100,000, goes to $105,000. But we do not digress from, we have identified those items. In fact, in your budget book, you can turn to page 21 to 25, and you can see what we did is we put in prior years to show you what has been, what we identified in prior years. And those identification items from FY 2000 all the way to 06 and now into 07, those are identified, and we stick with those items, and after a period of time, they'll roll in the fund balance if they're not used. So the idea is that we do stick to it. Back in 1997, if you recall, Counselor, we might have all these projects listed, but we may only have $300,000, and they never identified where we wanted to spend that money. Now it's identified, and before any monies can be released, the city controller, Andrew Pergel, sends me an email, I review it, and then I release it. We typically try not to release until the third and fourth quarter of the fiscal year unless it's a necessity earlier on.
Okay, I'd like to refer to page 65. And this is an issue that I'm quite concerned with. And now there's a $350,000 figure for library furnishings, so tables, chairs, seating, computer tables, etc. Looking back in last year's capital plan, there was only a $300,000 figure plugged in for 07. Here we've increased it $50,000. Why?
I will defer to the city's librarian, Mary Ann List. Mary Ann?
I understand your question and do appreciate it. As I said, we had hoped to cover more of the furnishings out of the original bond than it really is turning out we're able to do. In addition, one of the very large expenditures in library furnishings is steel book stack. As you know, one of the worst increases that we're seeing in construction right now is in steel, both in price and availability. So in all truth, we have seen inflationary figures there in a lot of places, and that is the reason for that extra $50,000.
In Your Honor, if I might, I just want to take this opportunity to commend the staff, Mary Ann List and Dave Allen and Dan Hartree, who's not here tonight. There's been a huge amount of value engineering that's gone into the project because of the issues with Katrina, the delays in the project, and the volunteers on the board, you know, John O'Leary, Mr. Grossman, and Peter Bresciano, as well as Todd Hansen. All those people have spent time and effort with the architect, the value engineer. I gave a directive that we were not going to, on the construction end, go beyond the numbers that were appropriated by the City Council, and I want to tell you, they have worked hard and tirelessly to achieve that without compromising programs. And it has been, I am amazed the amount of work that they've been able to do and the successes that they've had in keeping the program intact for the library without giving up a lot of major of the programming, a lot of things that we want in the building.
You know, then I look at the amount of money that's being appropriated this time around for the master plan for Pierce Island. And they reduced it from $100,000 that was allocated last year for 07 to $50,000. And I said that $50,000 went towards furnishings for the library. And, you know, we're in the last phase of our master plan. Last year, you allocated for 07 $100,000. This year, I see nothing allocated for 07 for the master plan in the Pierce Island project. And we're going all the way out to 08, which is only $50,000. And we're about to finish our master plan, and the committee is going to be very upset when they see that there's no money this year.
Quick question, just so we're on the same page. What page is the Pierce Island?
This is on page 74, the Pierce Island master plan.
Your Honor, if I can speak to that issue, we certainly did not link that to the library issue. But I would remind the counselor that over the last 5 to 6 years, over $3 million has been spent out on Pierce Island. And there has been a huge commitment on the part of the city council as well as the city staff to making that happen. You can only, I mean, over that 5 to 7 years, there have been huge amounts of commitments made. So yes, we should still continue to make commitments, but I want the public to be aware and the new council members to be aware there's been a huge commitment, a $3 million commitment that has been leveraged substantially with federal and state monies. So I would love to be able to continue, and we will, but I just think it's important to recognize that that has been a priority for a number of years.
You know, we're phasing down to the last project, which is phase 3 of that master plan, and that's the boat launching ramp plus a little gazebo and some landscaping and some added parking as you enter Pierce Island. That's the last phase. That's why we like to see it continue.
And if I could ask one quick question related to Pierce Island, since we're on that topic, in terms of the boat launch discussion, any update in terms of the timetable? Is that something that would be an FY07?
Well, I'll defer to the deputy city manager to give you an update on that.
Sure. As probably most of you know, we will be in the spring constructing, and we have under contract the new ramp that's going to go in, the concrete planking ramp, and then there'll be a wooden boat dock so that you can back down the ramp on either side, tie up your boat, and launch it. You know, Harold's right. We did have a master plan in place for Pierce Island. We have been biting that off and funding chunks. A lot of that funding has come through federal grant sources, and sometimes we like to give those federal grant sources a rest because they don't like to year after year after year put in $50,000 or $100,000 to the same place. So that's part of the thinking on this. In terms of improvements to the boat launch parking area, that's going to be a very big ticket item that will probably take external funds as well as general fund money over a period of years. And one other sort of side note is I know that one issue that has been of concern to the Pierce Island Committee, Councilor Whitehouse, is the bridge railings as you cross onto Pierce Island, and that is funded, I think, over the next 2 years, Steve. And I think the concern there from the residents' concern is the aesthetics of it. And that's going to look a lot better.
Very good. Thank you very much. Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to follow up on Councilor Whitehouse because he started with talking about the library issue, and then he went to Pierce Island. But my comment is on the library, and I want to be very careful how I say this because I mean no disrespect. In fact, I have great admiration for the team that we have in our city staff and the job that they've done with the design process of that library, implementing the city's commitment to make it a LEED certified energy efficient building. And again, also no disrespect to the city manager in his commitment to keep the capital cost at the level that was talked about that we committed to however many years ago now. But I get very concerned when I hear that we've been doing a lot of value engineering because, again, as many of you know, I have some professional background with this. I'm not an engineer, but in the world of energy efficiency and policy, and to me, value engineering too often, and to a lot of people in the energy efficiency, high-performance building profession who are engineers and architects, and I've had enough conversations, that term value engineering too often means making the building cheaper, making things thinner, lighter, less expensive materials, and what you end up with is a building that does not perform as well over the long haul. And I am very concerned that we may be, for very understandable reasons. I mean, I'm fully aware of the controversy a long time over the library committing to do it at all, and then, of course, so I'm very aware of why our library team might be extremely hesitant to come back and say, you know what, steel costs, everything has gone up. The capital cost is just pushing up more than we, more than we can deal with. But I'm very concerned that we may end up being penny wise and pound foolish. At the Joint Budget Committee and at everybody in our personal lives, we're talking this year about how much energy costs are busting our budget. And energy costs have gone up, what, 30, 40%, 50 maybe since we finalized the design for the library. And the time to invest in the energy efficiency of a building is in the design and construction process, because you build it once and then you pay to operate it for all the out years. And in a building that we're going to bond for 20 years, is that correct? We're bonding this over 20 years. Basically, if you think about that for just a minute, you should be making any investment in energy efficiency that can be paid back within 20 years, because you're going to have for 20 years the capital cost, you're going to pay the bonds, and alongside those you're going to pay the energy bills. So you're going to pay both. And if you can make an investment in energy efficiency that pays back within 20 years, you should make it. So the time to invest in that is when you build it. And so I'm saying, I'm not concerned about, $350,000 for furnishings. I'm concerned saying, if we should spend $200,000 more on the energy efficiency of this building, we should do it, and we should appropriate that money, because we're going to pay the bond and we're going to pay the utility bills.
If I might, Your Honor, the Councilor Reynolds makes a good point, and I'd like to have Dave Allen speak to it, because your words kept ringing in our ears when we were doing the so-called value engineering, and certainly we are still going to strive for the LEED certification. But I'd like to have Dave talk about some of the things that we've kept in. So, on the face of it, you might think we abandoned many of those things, but
again, I don't mean to.
No, and
that.
I'm
saying I understand
sure,
where they are.
But let me have Dave talk a little bit about what we preserved.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that one of the most important elements that we looked on as we were going through this value engineering was the energy portion, and to that end, we had already done an energy model as part of the project, and the analysis that we use that energy model in making our decisions toward the HVAC system and some of the other systems that we have in that building. And quite frankly, when we were making cuts on this thing, and looking at where we could save and what things could be changed, we actually did end up throwing back into the equation variable frequency drives, some high efficiency motors, high efficiency boilers. Those types of elements did get put into this thing with that, with an energy model, with numbers that told us these are worth paying for now. There's a payback on these, and we will have an energy efficient building with that. So believe me, Councilor Reynolds, we were looking at that very, very hard and seriously.
Okay, and again, I know that you have been, and I take you at your word. The reason I brought this up is to, again, because I understand how reluctant everybody involved would be to come back and say, geez, we just need another 100,000. But I'm saying publicly, if we should do that, then we should do that, and we could explain that to the taxpayers because of what I said. So I appreciate the explanation, Dave. And again, whenever those calculations were done, what was the price of energy that was put in? And now just 6 months, 8 months later, all of a sudden natural gas is 40% more. So
And that is the beauty of the model, is that it is a model and you can change the parameters within that model to make that decision. And these decisions on how this building is going to be finished off have actually happened within the last couple of months. So we've been working with updated figures on both energy costs and materials.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And thank you for the question, because I think other councilors would agree that in discussion with folks, this is something that, because you look at your own energy bill month to month, it's a very legitimate concern people have. They go, if my house costs X to heat, imagine what it costs this large municipal building to heat. It's a very legitimate fear and concern, and I think that's a good information being exchanged right there. That's one of the reasons why, and I think it's appropriate to mention it one more time in the context of a capital budget, why in the next 4 to 6 weeks we'll be creating a blue ribbon committee on sustainability issues. This is obviously one component of that. It's a higher concern than I ever thought a couple of years ago. Education for myself, listening to a lot of folks who have this very high on their radar screen as well. So I think in future buildings it'll be good to be cognizant of this very early, because as Councilor Reynolds said, it's a lot more cost efficient to do this at the beginning of the process than to do it retroactively, and it seems in this case we've done that successfully. So appreciate that. And with that, one other comment. It's about 8:35 right now. If there are pressing issues, obviously we're not going to short circuit it. But if we try to set a goal of being done by approximately 9 o'clock, that might seem like a goal. I would bet that would receive unanimity here tonight. Any other questions about any issue in here? Yep, Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one comment of not so much what's in here, but a project that's not in here. And that was, in the prior city council, it was talked about a study to be done for noise barriers along the Atlantic Heights neighborhood and the borders of 95. And I don't see that in here, and I'm wondering, is that just an oversight? If so, is there a way to add that in here?
Well, we can take a noise barriers along Wood.
I believe it was along the 95.
Panaway and Atlantic.
Panaway and, yep. There's a prior city council, I remember listening to it during, when we were all out visiting the neighborhoods. It was a subject that came up, and I know there was a comment made in the prior city council that this would be the proper vehicle for that to be looked in, and if we could add that on here.
Are you speaking to not the high-level bridge?
Yes.
Well, I think
the sound barrier along there, and it was also
they don't
the whole
typically
95 corridor.
But typically there wouldn't be a sound barrier on the high level on a bridge. Typically, I think there was a letter.
I think it was the approach side of it.
The access.
Yeah, the approach. Steve, do you have? I think the DOT commissioner responded to that issue, didn't she?
I remember the neighborhood committee coming before the council on that matter, and I believe that the city council, along with the mayor, wrote a letter to Carol Murray, the commissioner of the DOT, asking them to seriously look at the noise issue along 95 Atlantic Heights on the bridge. I don't remember any response back from Carol at this point, but I can check into that.
But, and I'd like to speak to that. That really would be something that we'd want to get DOT to fund, because they ultimately, I mean, we could do a study and they could say, fine, but we're not going to do anything with that. So I mean, I don't disagree that we shouldn't pursue it, but I think there is a letter out there that we need to probably follow up on with Commissioner Murray.
Assistant Mayor?
Just as a follow-on to Councilor Smith's comment, with all due respect to the, ever overburdened State Highway Department, when will we see the General Sullivan Bridge? And my concern is,
one of the things Portsmouth's always been good at is doing some of the factual legwork up front, so that if we have to advocate for something, even if someone else is going to pay for it, I don't know how much a study would cost, and so I'd have grave concerns if it was a lot of money. But that being said, we're in a better position to lobby the state if we know what it's going to cost.
And I would say that at any event, that we probably should identify it in '08, because to identify it any sooner, you're already bumping about one, with probably what we're going to be adding in for the middle school, we could be bumping up about $1.8 million by the time we're done for general fund. Not to say that we shouldn't pursue it. We can also pursue it through our legislators, through our regional planning agency, and other places like we did with the with Ocean Road. So I think, yes, for identification purposes, you can make a motion to that effect. I'll try to get a number on what it would cost for a study, but I would suggest that it be placed like in an out year, fiscal year '08, so that it's in the plan and we can start, so we have it in for identification purposes.
And just to follow up, I believe it was also Panaway Manor as well.
Yep.
So
Right.
it was both neighborhoods.
Very good.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilor.
Before we leave the Pierce Island issue, Deputy City Manager talked about the railing on Pierce Island Bridge. It badly need a repair. It's an eyesore, plus it's dangerous, very dangerous. Now, last year's capital plan, it was earmarked $150,000 for this year to update it or replace it or juvenile, or whatever you want to call it. But this year, they stretched it out to $75,000 for the year '07 and $75,000 for the year '08. And I was wondering why.
You can put it in '07 if the council wishes to. 150, you could
We'll
actually
be
move
talking
it.
about that, maybe.
Certainly, if the council wishes to do it, just remember that those numbers will be in your budget for '07, so that you need to, I think, from a reality perspective, the historical funding of these general fund projects have been in the range of about $1 million to $1.2 million. And like I said, in '04 and '05, the city council dropped them down to $750,000. Again, as I indicated, from adding to the project that we just talked about, we potentially could be up to about 1.7, 1.8. And certainly, one thing I would like to say about the rail, Counselor, if we do it this way, on July 1st, 2007, we'll be able to start work on that. We will be able to, in the winter of 2007, get our bids together, get them out, and then, boom, on July 1, 2007, we'll be able to do that replacement, because you got to remember, that money's available on July 1 of that fiscal year, okay?
Okay, while I got the floor, one more, and then I'm all through. Okay. On page 127, let's talk about Chestnut Street. Now, the $50,000 will come from the general fund, but the other $50,000, which will equal $100,000 to do Chestnut, memorial for the African American, and blocking off Chestnut Street, and shrubbery and a monument, and curbing and everything. That $50,000 will come from contributions and grants and donations, right?
That is the intent.
Yep. Okay. End of speech.
And just want to close the loop on one thing from the discussion right before about Pierce Island and the railing. How did we leave that? That seemed to be some back and forth, and then we just kind of left it hanging.
Your Honor, Counselor Whitehouse is satisfied, though I thought the issue was dead, but no, I will just explain again that the monies would be appropriated over 2 years. $75,000 would be available on July 1, 2006, and then we would have $75,000 available on July 1, 2007, because fiscal year '08 runs July 1 to June 30. And so that monies would be available. We would probably start working on putting it out to bid in the winter of '07 and be ready to go right in the summer or in the fall of '07. So We might even, and once we, as soon as we got the appropriation, we'd still be able to authorize proceeding with it, so.
Very good. Thank you. Yep, Councilor Grasso.
Yes, Your Honor. Just like to make a statement that I think that as far as capital projects coming out of the general fund, I think we should stick as close to $1 million as possible, because in light of what I've been hearing at the budget sessions, this is going to be a very difficult year with the budget. We have to make up what we're in the hole for the city from energy costs. We have to make that up and then build that into the next year's budget. So I don't know how we can prioritize or what, but I would just like to say that it would be my wish that we could keep the general fund money in the capital budget as low as possible.
Okay, duly noted. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Dwyer.
I just want to also talk about the African burial ground, and I'm not suggesting adding money for this year or necessarily adding public money, but I do note the phrase fitting memorial, and I'm speaking for a number of people who've mentioned this to me, the hope that that we take the time to do a fitting memorial, and whether it's something that can be done next year or whether it will take a couple of years, some concern about at least what's been publicized of, granite posts and brick sidewalks sounds to people like a bank parking lot, and that more time be taken to do something that really has the integrity for what the site is all about, especially now that I think this has become a regional and even a national interest. I know I've had comments from people around the country who've noted it being picked up by the press. So I'm not suggesting that we add more money for the next year, but that we not just go too lightly into what would eventually be something that's very important for Portsmouth.
And just speaking to that issue, I think the community of interest, the African American community, will be heavily involved with the design. I think the idea from Councilor Hines' committee was primarily just to get a decision relative to the closure of the street to as his committee wanted to do, to show the respect if we reinter the remains at that location. And I just want to remind the council that certainly that's the community of interest, and the state archaeologists will have that decision.
And it probably also underscores as I think Councilor Whitehouse mentioned, that there is a component earmarked for fundraising as one of the funding streams for it, and obviously an awfully worthy cause and an awfully important component of funding this. So hopefully that is something that as we move forward will get the publicity it deserves in order to help generate the funding it deserves. Any other questions or comments? Yes, right at the buzzer. I saw you.
Plenty of time, but I wanted to make sure that everyone else is getting their turn. I have I guess an observation and then a mention of several items in the CIP and a question that goes along with it. It all relates to the master plan goal of improving bicycle access and accommodations throughout our city. First, I just want to mention, of course, in the master plan, goal T4 is provide for safe and convenient bicycle and pedestrian circulation throughout the city. There's a recommendation, specific strategy to develop a citywide bicycle and pedestrian.
Sorry, Councilor, what page is that, just so you can follow?
Sorry, on the master plan, I'm referring to the master plan. It's goal T4 of the master plan, and a strategy underneath that. Underneath that goal is, I'm just reading from it, to develop a citywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. So do we have such right now, or is there something underway? I know that there's been work done, and I know John Burke shepherded a lot of stuff along while he was here, but he left. I guess, where are we with that?
Steve, you want to respond to that?
There are a number of our projects that have taken into account the bicycles and the pedestrians. One of note is Newcastle Ave, but unfortunately, because of our constraints with our right-of-way, in a lot of cases we cannot get but we would consider separate travel lanes for bicycles. We have new sidewalk in that particular project, but that one will be a share the road type of situation and signage. The project that we're working on as well up on Market Street Extension is supposed to be incorporating bicycles and pedestrians, but that there again, you've got a roadway that is 50 miles an hour and people are traveling, even though the speed limit is only 35. So in all of our projects, we take into account the pedestrian and the bicyclist. One of the projects that was went through a whole design process was from the bike bridge to Pease off in Rockingham Ave. From that point up to Maplewood, down Maplewood to the center of town. The preferred route was just that, except for the constraint with the Maplewood Ave Bridge. And I think the ruling that we came out with at that point in time was that there was no way that we could safely carry traffic across that bridge in its current condition. Thus, when the bridge is replaced as part of the total project for the Route 1 bypass, the bridge will be widened to accommodate bicyclists as well. I think if you remember back with that particular process, it was proposed to try and take the bicyclists on Woodbury Ave to Dennett Street and then down Dennett Street. But the problem you have in that stretch from Rockingham to Dennett Street on Woodbury Ave, you have the ramps both north and southbound coming in there. You have a very wide, busy area with all the hotels. And it was felt that we could not safely accommodate and specifically address bicyclists in that stretch. So I think in answer to your question, Councilor, we try and do that in all of our projects.
Thank you. If I could just continue, I hope it doesn't sound, I'm not trying to sort of play gotcha or put anybody on the spot. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to inquire. I know that, of course, we're a 300-year-old city and we have certain rights of way that are defined. In most cases, you probably don't have the luxury to just go ahead and add a 3-foot bike lane. And I'm very pleased to see that in a couple of places in the CIP, we do have projects that use the term that we're intending to put a bike lane, particularly on the Market Street extension. We're talking about that. That's a very wide road, and Grafton Road out by Pease. So I just want to urge that in some of the other things, another of the elements that we have in here, 3 of them for intersection upgrades and improvements, Spinney and Islington, Middle Street and Miller, and Plains Avenue and Peverly Hill. And then it's also mentioned the sidewalk bike ped improvements on Peverly Hill Road. I guess I just want to urge that we, and you just said, we try to do whatever we can. I'm bringing this up because we've done a lot of intersections and some road improvements over the past several years, particularly the biggest high visibility, Congress and Islington and Maplewood, and that's of course the main route to downtown. And what I find as a cyclist is that a lot of times there's room for you on the street as you're proceeding, particularly something like Middle Street, plenty of room. But what you find is when you get to the intersection is where the squeeze comes. Suddenly, there was 1 lane of cars and it's just fine. But if you're on a bike and you're either at the intersection first, you find that you just get your elbow bumped by a rearview mirror, or if you come up behind, maybe there's 3 cars in the intersection, there's no room there at the intersection. Of course, those are the toughest, those are the most dangerous places. So I'm just raising the issue. Again, I'm pleased to see bike lanes in a couple places, but I hope we can strive to, in the striping that we do and the design with the curb and the sidewalk widths, as much as we can, try to create just some space so that bicyclists have a chance. We're never going to achieve perfection. We've got state highways and bridges and stuff crossing, but if we can try to create some space when we do those intersection upgrades, I think is particularly an area to focus. Thanks.
Very good. Okay, any other questions or comments on this or any other matter?
I just want to remind the city council that the next time that we'll be reviewing this will be the March 20th, will be a public hearing. It's my understanding the one item that I will be adding to this capital plan will be on page, let me see, 63. I'll put a dollar amount into that element sheet for the middle school study.
And I guess this both for the folks around the table and at home, a lot of discussion about shifting out years in terms of amounts for out years. Those would be done as amendments when we get to April.
Right, Your Honor. Actually, there are two. Well, let me just go over those quickly so that at least I have them written down. We would be taking the 2008 Station 2, 2010 Station 3. We would be doing, there's a correction on page 70, the $100,000 prior year funding. And then page 100, Worth Parking Garage, Councilor Grasso has a concern relative to that, pushing that out. And then Councilor Smith had a question and a concern regarding study for noise barriers along Panaway and Atlantic Heights. And certainly we'll take a look at the number, but it would be a motion that you might want to make on April 3rd after the public hearing to add that in to, and my suggestion would be an 08 year, so that it would be for identification purposes and we can move it along. So that's what I have, Your Honor, unless somebody else has something else.
And if I'm not mistaken, if folks at home want to view the document.
It's on the website. It's also at the library. You also come into the city clerk's office. So it is available for those that want to review it.
Very good. Unless there are any other questions or comments, I think we're done for the evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you.